This is the story of an execution. It did not happen with a raised voice, a leaked tabloid rumor, or a public confrontation. It happened in complete devastating silence inside the most heavily guarded corridors of Windsor Castle. In a matter of seconds, Queen Camilla went from believing she held absolute dominion over the British monarchy to staring at a piece of canvas that proved she actually controls absolutely nothing. What Camilla realized behind closed doors that morning as her body physically froze mid-stride in the Hall of Matriarchs was that a 25-year-old secret had just been weaponized against her. The official portrait of Princess Diana, a painting Camilla had personally shoved into a dark storage room decades ago, was suddenly hanging right beside Queen Elizabeth. But this video is not just about a painting being pulled out of the dark. It is about a staggering shift in institutional power. It is about how Prince William and Princess Anne quietly orchestrated the ultimate administrative trap, using centuries-old royal protocol to dismantle Camilla's illusion of absolute power. And the terrifying realization that her entire royal existence can be erased by a single signature. To understand why this moment shattered Camilla so completely, you have to look back at the 30-year game she played to get to that hallway, and the sheer cruelty of her early victories. There is an illusion that Camilla simply survived the tragedy of the 1990s and gracefully accepted her eventual role. That is a fabricated public relations narrative. The reality was an active, methodical campaign of institutional erasure directed at a woman who could no longer defend herself. During the darkest days of Diana's marriage, when the Princess of Wales was visibly wasting away from bulimia and struggling under the crushing weight of public scrutiny, Camilla was safely tucked away at her country estate in Wiltshire. Over morning tea, she and her aristocratic circle would read the most savage tabloid attacks on Diana and laugh. They viewed Diana as fundamentally common and emotional inconvenience, who simply did not understand how the upper classes operated. In those private drawing rooms, Camilla allowed Diana to be referred to as the clothes horse, a cruel moniker meant to strip the princess of all humanity and reduce her to a hollow prop. Camilla never corrected a single guest. She enjoyed the staggering exploitation of Diana's emotional collapse because it reinforced her own belief that she was the one truly meant to stand beside Charles. That belief morphed into brazen confidence the moment Diana died in Paris. Within hours of the tragic news, before the British public even fully comprehended that their princess was gone, the bureaucratic machinery of the palace was already working to secure crown jewels from the hospital room. And while that cold institutional machinery was turning, Camilla was moving into the physical spaces Diana had occupied. She did not just move in, she purged. Diana had a habit of keeping fresh flowers in her personal quarters, a small attempt to bring warmth into an otherwise freezing environment. Camilla ordered those flowers to be physically carried out and burned. She ordered the bedroom where Diana had comforted her to, young boys on her darkest nights, to be permanently locked. She wanted the room sealed as if they contained a disease. And then came the portrait. The painting in question was completed during the absolute height of Diana's life. It captured her warmth, her profound empathy, and the undeniable star power that no other royal possessed. When Diana first saw the finished piece, she was so moved that she stood in absolute silence, fighting back tears before kissing the hands of the artist. It was destined for the Hall of Matriarchs, a sacred space reserved for the most consequential women in the history of the British crown. Diana had paid for that space with her blood and her sanity. But the moment Camilla had the necessary proximity to power, she intervened. She carried the painting down the corridor herself. When a palace staff member instinctively stepped forward to help carry the heavy frame, Camilla humiliated them so brutally in front of their colleagues that the staff member backed away in total submission. Camilla shoved the canvas into a dusty, forgotten storage room, pulled the heavy wooden door shut, and walked away smiling. She believed she had permanently rewritten history. She believed that by hiding the visual evidence of Diana's existence, she had finally won. She forgot that there was a 15-year-old boy walking behind his mother's coffin who saw absolutely everything. Prince William did not scream. He did not rebel in the ways the press hoped he would. He absorbed the agonizing reality of his mother's institutional erasure, and he pressed it down deep into his core. He spent the next 2 decades watching Camilla elevate her own non-royal children, watching her demand titles, watching her manipulate the financial and visual legacy of the crown. But William was doing something Camilla never anticipated. He was studying. He spent years in quiet private meetings with palace curators, royal archivists, and constitutional experts. He learned the exact bureaucratic architecture of the monarchy. He understood that in this family, you do not win by throwing tantrums. You win by owning the paperwork, and when the tectonic plates of royal power finally shifted, when William inherited the Duchy of Cornwall and the vast, staggering wealth that comes with it, he realised he no longer had to simply watch. The trigger for this silent retaliation came when Camilla recently attempted to further cement her dominance over the visual representation inside Windsor, reportedly making demands about estate access and gallery placements that crossed an invisible line. She pushed too far, relying on the commercial desperation of a woman who knows deep down she owns no actual property of her own. She only has access to it because her husband allows it. William saw the overreach and he executed his trap flawlessly. He did not argue with her. He made a single phone call to Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, a woman who had carried her own 50-year grudge against Camilla ever since Camilla inserted herself between Anne and Andrew Parker Bowles in the 1970s. Did not hesitate. The plan was activated in total silence. William utilized a routine administrative update. A flawless paper trail of royal collection warrants that he possessed the absolute legal right to authorize. His staff orchestrated a decoy scheduling Camilla for a public engagement outside of London. The sole purpose of this diary entry was to physically remove her from Windsor Castle and hold her there until the operation was complete. With Camilla miles away, the Hall of Matriarchs was locked down. Only a handful of meticulously vetted staff members were permitted entry. Princess Anne insisted on being present. She had waited half a century to watch the illusion of Camilla's supremacy begin to crack. The staff moved with extraordinary care, venturing into the dark storage room, lifting the heavy frame and carrying it back into the light. When they removed the protective linen and the tissue paper, Diana's face re-emerged in the gallery. The air in the room fundamentally changed. Princess Anne stepped forward, looked at the woman who had been ground down to nothing by the institution, reached out her hand and gently straightened the edge of the frame. It was a gesture of immense unspoken respect. Within 90 minutes, the installation was entirely complete, protected by airtight legal protocols that no court and no king could easily undo. The next morning, Camilla walked down that familiar Windsor corridor, unhurried, believing herself to be the untouchable queen of the realm. And then she looked up. Diana was there, right beside Queen Elizabeth. The exact spot that had been empty for a quarter of a century was filled with the radiant, enduring face of the woman Camilla had spent her entire adult life trying to destroy. The physical shock was so severe that Camilla stopped completely dead in her tracks. Staff members present noted a sound escaped her throat that defied description, a raw, involuntary gasp of pure panic. The illusion evaporated in an instant. She immediately pivoted to rage. She ordered the staff to take the painting down that very second. The staff, bound by William's royal warrant, quietly informed her that they could not comply. She demanded a face-to-face meeting with the Prince of Wales. The request was ignored. Panicked and experiencing the absolute terror of a woman realizing her power is entirely fictional, she turned and ran straight to King Charles. She burst into his rooms expecting him to do what he had done for 30 uninterrupted years. She demanded he intervene. She demanded he scream at his son. She demanded he protect her at the expense of his family, his institution, and his own flesh and blood. She stood before the King of England waiting for him to save her. And Charles just looked at her and remained completely devastatingly silent. That silence in the king's private study was not just a pause in a conversation. It was the sound of a tectonic shift in the British monarchy. For 30 years, Charles had been Camilla's absolute shield. He had torn his family apart for her, battled his own mother for her, and hired the most aggressive public relations executives in London to force the British public to accept her. Whenever she demanded that a problem be made to disappear, Charles made it disappear. But as she stood furiously in front of him that morning, demanding that he tear Princess Diana's portrait down from the Hall of Matriarchs, Charles did not reach for the telephone. He did not summon his aides. He looked at his wife, he looked down at his desk, and he chose his son. That is where the story changes. Charles's refusal to intervene was not born out of sudden malice toward Camilla. It was born out of a cold, undeniable institutional reality. Charles is a transitional monarch and he knows it. His health is fragile, his reign will be relatively short, and the actual functional power of the crown is already transferring to Prince William. What Camilla failed to realize in her panic was that William had not simply hung a piece of canvas on a wall, he had executed a flawless legal maneuver. To remove that portrait, Charles would have to officially and publicly override the Prince of Wales, the future king, regarding the historical placement of his own deceased mother. Charles would have to go to war with his heir to protect the ego of his wife. And in that silent room, Charles finally accepted that he no longer had the strength or the leverage to fight that battle. He let Camilla stand there in the quiet, completely undefended for the first time in her royal life. This is the exact moment where the devastating contrast of Schadenfreude comes into play. For decades, Camilla operated with the swagger of a billionaire conqueror, backed by relentless PR machinery that spun her as the ultimate victor. But the reality of her position is rooted in staggering commercial desperation. Strip away the titles, the bespoke gowns, and the palace staff, and you are left with a woman who actually owns nothing. She possesses no generational royal wealth. She does not hold the deeds to the vast royal estates. When Queen Elizabeth died, the billion-dollar Duchy of Cornwall, the massive portfolio of land properties and liquid assets that funds the upper tier of the royal family transferred directly and exclusively to Prince William. William owns the literal ground they walk on. He controls the leases, the agricultural lands, and the private funding. Camilla is, in the most brutal bureaucratic terms, a highly titled tenant. If she pushes William too far, if she attempts to wage a shadow war against him or his wife, she has no financial or structural fortress to retreat to. She is entirely dependent on the king's allowance, and the king's time is finite. What looked like a routine administrative update regarding a portrait was actually a total dismantling of her empire. William was quietly reminding her that her access to the palaces, the vehicles, and the lifestyle exists purely at his discretion. That detail matters. It changes the entire psychological landscape of Windsor Castle. And while Camilla was spiraling into administrative panic, the true future of the monarchy was quietly solidifying just down the corridor. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, did not need to scream demand or throw tantrums to assert her dominance. Her power is absolute because it is earned, authentic, and universally recognized. Catherine has endured her own brutal trials, facing intense public scrutiny and severe health battles with a stoic, uncomplaining grace that Camilla could never comprehend. Catherine never tried to erase Diana. Instead, she honors her softly wearing Diana's sapphire engagement ring every single day. A constant flashing visual reminder to Camilla of the bloodline she could never infiltrate. When Catherine walks into a royal function, the air changes. She possesses the natural incandescent aura of a queen in waiting. And now, whenever Catherine walks through the Hall of Matriarchs, she does so under the watchful, painted eyes of her late mother-in-law. Diana's presence on that wall serves as a permanent silent guardian over William and Catherine's reign. It is a visual restoration of the natural order. The bloodline is secure, the legacy is protected, and the woman who tried to burn it all to the ground is forced to walk past that portrait every single day, completely powerless to take it down. Camilla finally has the crown she spent decades scheming to acquire, but she has just realized it is completely hollow. She controls no territory, she commands no genuine loyalty from the institution. She is surrounded by courtiers who are already looking past her toward the future king. The side doors, the revoked, access the meticulously placed portrait. They are all forensic proof of a shifting tide that no PR strategy can hold back. William and Princess Anne did not just restore a painting, they restored justice. They executed a masterpiece of institutional revenge, proving that the deepest cuts do not make a sound and that true power never needs to shout. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the hidden dynamics of the royal family. If you appreciated this forensic look at the truth behind the palace walls, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below telling us what you think about William's brilliant strategic move. We will see you in the next one.